Let's continue with the paragraph panel. So the first thing we have in here is how the paragraph is set. And if I just click on the entire area of text, this will apply to the entire thing. So if I set this to center, you can see that it centers everything. The text up at the top and then each paragraph after that. I'm going to put this back to left. If I just get my cursor inside of one paragraph and I make a change, then it only applies to the paragraph that is selected, or that paragraph that happens to have the cursor blinking in it. Now, I would like to go through all of these with you, but I will tell you that really as a graphic designer, this option here for left, aligned left, and this right here, justify with last line adjusted left, is really all you ever use for continuous text. But you may have a reason to use one of the other ones from time to time. So I'll show you all of them. So let's go ahead, put the cursor in here. And so there is your standard aligned left. There is your centered. The reason you don't want to use centered or aligned right, where it aligns to the right edge but lets the edge ragged here, is anytime you have a ragged edge at the left, it's harder for the reader to know where to start. So it slows down the reading, and that is why you don't use it in a textbook or on websites or things like that. It's generally used for things where you want the reader to slow down, like poetry or song lyrics. Okay, and then these last four are different methods of justifying the text. So if you do want a clean edge on the left and a clean edge on the right, then this would be the one that you use. Now I'll tell you some dangers about setting type this way, but let's first go through all four of these. This option right here centers the last one, so it really doesn't make any sense. This one takes the last one and throws it to the right, which doesn't make any sense. And this one forces out all of the text, so you can see you get some really ugly text spacing on the last line. So why do you want to be careful about justifying text? The reason is you can end up with some very awkward spacing in your text, and you notice it the smaller the column width gets. So, and I'm going to turn off show hidden characters here, type show hidden characters, and what happens is you start to get really bad, exaggerated. Some areas the type is real tight between words, and some areas it's real loose. And then you can get what's known as rivers, where you get like predictable line spacing, and it's a distraction to the eye. So hopefully you'll learn about this in typography classes, but the general rule of thumb when you set type justified is you want to have a fairly wide column width, but the widest that's generally recommended is 4 inches. So I would say if you want to set your type justified, I would probably go with the column width of 4 inches. This next option in here is a left indent. So if I start increasing this, you can see what happens is it indents the text to the left. That's normally only used for offsetting text for a quote or something similar to that. And then here you have similarly the right indent. Well, I don't think I have anything selected there. So if I select this first, something in the first paragraph, you can see now it will offset it from the right side. So you don't use those too often. The one that you do use more often is the first line indent, and that is for typical paragraph indenting. Typically the amount that you want to indent a paragraph, it's known as 3 M's, but it's really you take the type size and you multiply it by 3. You could multiply it by 2. Some people even say 1. I don't think 1 is enough, but either double your type size or triple your type size. There's another interesting thing though, is you don't generally indent the first paragraph. It's considered redundant because you indent the paragraph to let the reader know that it's a new thought, and if it's the first paragraph, we know it's a new thought. Let me just get a little more text to show up here, and I'll show you. This is generally how I use this. What I do is I put the cursor in here, I do Command A to select all of the text, and then I apply this, and then I unapply it to the first paragraph. So let's say that we do want to do 3 M's, so we multiply our type size by 3, and I believe I saw over here that the type size was 12, so times 3 would mean that would be 36 points that would go in here, and it default at that. So then we would go back, we would select the first paragraph and this subhead here, and I did that by just holding down the Shift key and clicking there. So now we know that something in the first paragraph and something in this top area are selected, and then we'll zero those out. So I'm going to take out the paragraph indent from all this type here by putting a cursor in there, Command A to select all, and then we'll zero this back out because I want to show you the other option for letting the reader know that it is a new thought or a new paragraph, and that would be to put a space between your paragraphs. Let me just first tell you that it is also considered redundant to do both. So you don't want to indent a paragraph and space a paragraph. Indenting is probably the most popular, but a space between paragraphs is very prominent on the web and also in things like annual reports where they can look very heavy and very dry without some spacing in there. And I think it's important to emphasize that this paragraph panel is how you adjust your paragraphs. You do not hit the tab key to indent your paragraph, because when you hit the tab key, how much are you indenting your paragraph? And if the answer is, well, I don't know, that's what I've always done, then you're not thinking like a designer. A designer's always in control of everything they do, from the amount of the paragraph indent or the space between. When you want to set your paragraph with the space in between, the space in between should be equal to the amount of leading that you have, typically. So first thing you want to do is figure out or remember what your leading was set at. So for that, you go back to the character panel, look at your leading. In this case, my type is set 12/15, which means a 12-point font with 15 points of leading. So I remember 15, go back to the paragraph panel. I once again will select all of my text. I will select this option here to put a space before paragraphs, and I will put 15 in there. Hit the tab key, and you can see that I probably can remove that from this first paragraph. So we'll select that, put that back to 0, and it doesn't, generally the program is smart enough to know not to just give you a blank space at the top of a column, but you could just take that out anyway, but you'll see it doesn't have any effect on it. So there you go, there's your spaces between paragraphs. And then you can see at the bottom here we have to hyphenate or not to hyphenate. Right now it's on. If we were to uncheck this, you can see the hyphenation goes away, but at the expense of the spacing not being quite as nice. This one is justified, and you can see it got a little bit awkward in there. And then these paragraphs here that had a ragged right edge to them, that edge no longer looks as nice. So hyphenation is good as long as you don't overdo it. And there's a couple rules to follow with hyphenation. And you set those rules inside of the drop-down menu inside of the paragraph panel. So I'll go to hyphenation. And so the general recommendations are that you set this to 5. It's okay to hyphenate after 2, but bring at least 3 words forward, and only 1 hyphen in a row is what that means. Generally, you don't have to worry about this. Right in the middle turns out to be okay. If your author or client should tell you not to hyphenate capitalized words, then you can uncheck this, and when you click OK, those go into effect. If you're picky and you look at the left edge of this text, you might notice something in here that bothers you. this word feels like it's indented a little bit, almost like a small paragraph indent. To fix that, you select all of your text and you go to the paragraph panel and you go to the drop down and you turn on Roman hanging punctuation. Now keep your eye on the mark there and you can see, well, that was not a very good example for that because it pushed it inside because it adjusted some things at the same time. So let me make up an example here and show you what I was supposed to be able to show you. Okay, so I guess this is a good example to let you know it has no effect on quotations, marks, or any punctuation inside of the paragraph. But what it does is when there is punctuation on the outskirts of a paragraph, what it does is it goes for the alignment of the text and not the punctuation. I'm not sure why the hanging punctuation is not turned on by default, but make sure that you do. Make yourself look professional. The thing that you really should always try as well with all of your text selected in this menu is Adobe Everyline Composer. The idea with the Everyline Composer is instead of just going one line at a time and deciding where to kick the next word down, is it looks at the entire paragraph. And that really worked well. In earlier versions, it didn't always work as good. So what I would say, and I'd probably still say this, is don't be afraid to turn it off and then back on again and then just judge for yourself which one looks the best. But in my opinion, the Everyline Composer is doing what it's supposed to do now. You may have learned in your typography class that you don't want a single word by itself on a line. So, and especially a small word like this. So the easiest way to fix this with no risk to the document, I will show you, but first let me show you what you don't want to do. So you might be thinking, well, why don't I just kick the down to the next line? So let's try that and see what happens. So if I get the cursor right there and hit return, what just happened? Well, remember that all paragraphs other than this first one have a first line indent, so that's not going to work. So let me Command Z that. I could use a soft return so it doesn't get the indent, and you might think that's a good solution, but the reason that it's really not is because if your type shifts later, see what happens? That soft return is still there, so it goofs up the integrity of the paragraph. All of this should be together here. So let me Command Z a couple times, get back to where I was, and let me show you the proper way to fix this. What you want to do is make a selection of the word right before the widow. So from here, I'll click and I'll drag. And you notice I don't have to even select the whole word, as long as I just get a part of it. And then I go up to and paragraph. Oh no, actually this one's under character. And we go to the drop down and I'm going to select no break. Now what that does is it keeps it, these will always be together. But the beauty of this is that no matter what, they're always together. In other words, it's not like you put that soft return in there and the can get broken from the rest of it. Now the only problem is technically a widow is less than, well, it's technically one word or less than 7 characters, and we only have 6 characters. So to really fix this, we would have to select from the end of this word all the way over. And again, in the character panel, go to no break. And now it even invoked the hyphen in that word, but that's fine. Now we have our 7 characters and life is good. In the next video, we will start talking about text threads.